I've intentionally made friends with some non-radical conservatives and was able to change their minds. Sometimes I think people just need to be generally shown another path they can take. I literally just don't have the energy anymore. Because like anytime someone tries to argue with me in good faith, they're actually not arguing in good faith. They're literally just wasting my time. I get when people are like, you know, curious about some things and they're like, hey, you know, like I don't know a lot about this topic and I might be really misinformed and I might be listening to anti-trans rhetoric. Can you like explain this to me? I'm like, yes, I can help you out. But like I had it so many times that people were just like, I just don't want children to transition. I just don't want children to get like surgeries and stuff. I think if you can't get a tattoo unless you're 18, then that means you also shouldn't get like surgeries. And it's like, that's not how gender affirming care works, especially for trans kids. The only children who are literally getting surgeries, 97% of the time, are cisgendered boys. Like you can't even get most of these surgeries under like 18, let alone 16. Like it doesn't happen. And we try to explain these things and they're like, nope, actually, I don't believe you. Or like sometimes they acknowledge that what they are saying is wrong, but they still turn around and they're like, I didn't actually know about this, but you know, like, my point still stands. I don't want trans kids to transition. That's a life-changing thing. I literally explained to you that this doesn't happen, and then you turn around and you still repeat the same, like, misinformation and still cling onto it. I'm so tired of, like, explaining things to people because most of the time they literally refuse to listen. So like, what is the point? Yeah, there are people who are like misinformed and a lot of people become conservatives if they are trying to fit in with the wrong crowd. I totally get this issue, but like, it's not on me to save them. I have the information. I'm sharing my experiences. I'm sharing what I have learned as a trans woman. I'm sharing everything that I've been through in the last 6 years. I talk about a lot of topics. The information is out there, but it is on the person to like actually sit there and listen. It's the same with like this one video I made about like, leave the kids alone, where I'm trying to explain what it was like for me to grow up as someone who didn't have like education on like trans topics and still being a trans kid. I'm explaining all these things, and because my thumbnail is like clickbaity YouTube thumbnail, that is a little bit too controversial, not gonna lie. I went a little bit ham on that, but like people are just refusing to even like watch the video, read the description or whatnot, and they're just like, nope, you're a groomer. And then I'm trying to explain, hey, actually this video is about like how my life was like and how my transitioning journey like started out and how I wish there was more trans representation and education, because a lot of times, you know, if you don't give children education on like LGBTQ topics, their first talking point, their first like experience with this is through porn, and that's not a good thing. And like I'm talking about all these things and they're like, nope, I can judge a book by its cover if the cover is talking about spicy work, gambling and whatnot. I literally had people like this be on Twitter and say these things to me, and it's like, this transphobic worldview that you build up could be shattered immediately if you just started listening. But I can't make you listen. So why would I sit there and have an argument with you where I have to literally go on the lowest level, break down every single misconception that you have? So much of the conservative playbook is ignoring everything. So after a point, you just stop playing the game. Yeah, it's just frustrating because people blame people like me for fascists converting like average people into right-wingers. But it's so much easier to appeal to like common sense and be like, oh, don't listen to experts, just listen to common sense. Like, you don't need to have like an education. You already know everything about the topic. You're perfect. You're amazing. Just listen to us. Don't listen to them. They are wrong. They are the enemy. They want to like convert you and do conversion therapy on you. They are actually the evil people. Like, all these professors, all these experts, they are actually the evil people. Just use your common sense. And if your common sense is literally 3rd grade biology, then like what can I do? Like, you're being taught to dismiss anything I say because I'm part of a group that you've been taught to hate. How can I reach people like that? And it's not possible unless it comes from the person within to realize, hey, you know, like I've been stuck in this echo chamber and it's full of hate. Maybe I should reevaluate my my worldview. And most of the times that only happens if they are part of the group that is like finally being affected by their talking points. If you're like pro vaccines, you know, it's like, oh, you know, like I've been vaccinated and it's helping me, and like I've seen people suffer who haven't been vaccinated. And then people come along and they're like, oh, don't listen to the doctors, just inject cow seed into your veins and that is going to clean you up. Then you're going to be like, hey, you know, this is the same party that also told me that trans people are evil and groomers and whatnot. Maybe now I can like start listening to trans people and see if what I've been taught is actually the right thing. Why do right-wingers always recruit cis straight young men? They're the easiest to manipulate. They're like, oh, you know, society oppresses me because I'm a man and they tell me that masculinity is a bad thing, and now finally this group comes along and they are saving me and catering towards me, and it's just manipulation. It's so frustrating to educate people like that. You're trying to explain something to them that you literally have to start on the lowest level, and a lot of people just don't want to hear you out. It's like, hey, you know, this is actually what gender means and how it's different from biological sex. And it's like, but I always thought gender and sex was the same thing and I'm using common sense. Like, why are you changing definitions that I've been using all my life? And it's like, hey, actually, you know, it's a misconception that gender and biological sex are now suddenly different things. Like, it was always separate because gender is a social construct and it always existed. But like, you've been taught to conflate these terms in order to push gender-based oppression. I find anti-vax weird, especially given that historically vaccines were the only way we have eradicated smallpox, rabies. Right-wingers are anti-science. They're anti-education, anti-woman. Everything they do is just to oppress women and other groups. And they are causing cultural issues, so people can't focus on what is actually going on in the world and focus on this class war. That is what they're trying to distract you from. The agenda of like Trump, like all these executive orders, they are literally just like flood your enemy, push all these things so you can get away with exploiting the common folk. Started to accept that trans people are valid in a psychology class where we learned there actually is a scientific basis to the existence of trans people, if that makes sense. The thing is, like, you're only going to learn about trans people when it comes to higher education, and that is bad. That is a bad thing. You should learn about trans people like early on. You know, LGBTQ education is really important, because if you introduce children to trans people, even if they are not trans and they don't identify with that concept, they are still not going to be like, huh, this person is different and they're a demon and they're actually out to get me and whatnot when they meet someone who is trans. And it also teaches trans kids what is going on inside their head. And if a cis kid can know they're cis, then a trans kid can know they're trans. The only difference is that society doesn't teach trans kids what being trans is, but it teaches cis kids what cis kids are. That causes a lot of issues. That makes trans kids to feel helpless and, you know, they're not being seen. And then I talk about these things, and then they're like these weirdos who are like, oh, you're grooming children. It's like, I'm not manipulating children. Trans people exist, and this is what being trans means. Like, you're not converting cis kids into trans kids. And like, you're explaining all these things, but they never want to listen because they literally think that like, oh, trans person talks about children, grooming. And then they like refuse to hear you out. And just like jump to hating you. Homophobia is a trained thing, yeah. And it can be avoided by education. It's just, I was like, if you were trans, you would have rated my makeup as a kid. Like, my mom was also like that. It's like, you're not trans, I would have known. You're not trans, you never liked going shopping with me. I was like, you don't know what it means to be trans. You don't know how I felt. But yeah, if you teach children like, hey, you know, trans people exist, this is what it means to be trans. We're not a different species, we're actually regular humans. But like, the people who are actually indoctrinating children are like transphobic parents who are like seeing someone who doesn't fit in their worldview and then teaching their children to hate that person. We see that with people teaching their children to hate immigrants. That is manipulating. All these Christian parents who are like putting their child in like mega hats and outfits and then letting them hold signs saying that Jesus would never allow trans people to exist. That is manipulation. I would have been transphobic if I didn't have any trans and gay friends. You're starting to hate people that you're not familiar with. It's like a primate instinct. It's this us versus them mentality. It's like, oh, these people's skin color is different. I grew up in a sheltered environment where everybody was white and just like me, and now I see someone who is a person of color and I'm just going to hate them because they're different. That's just why it's so important to have like diversity and teach people about the existence of gay people, about trans people, about intersex people. Teach them the difference between gender and biological sex. But like, that is the woke agenda. That's the woke mind virus, educating children. You can't have that. You gotta homeschool children and teach them to hate all these random groups. My mom's attitude is weird as she supports my trans friend, but when I told her I was trans, she said it's just a phase. I was like, oh, I don't mind trans people unless they are my children. That's wild. They used to look like a mix of a woman and a man a lot. Happens to a lot of cis people too. Like, sex is bimodal. You know, there's a lot of variety. And so it's always like frustrating when there are people like, you know, reducing it to like gametes or whatnot. And they're like, trans kids don't actually exist and trans people aren't actually real because no male has ever successfully changed gender to be a female because they never were able to switch the gametes. And it's like, you don't need that. Like, that's not what it means to be trans. Trans doesn't stand for transitioning. Gender is not the same as, you know, biological sex. And also, like, just because transitioning isn't perfect, just because a male can't produce female gametes and whatnot, doesn't mean that a man can't be a woman. It's a logical flaw to like reduce what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man to like something as simple as gametes, while literally ignoring everything about sex and gender. Because like, I don't produce gametes anymore, and then people are like, there's still some leftover reproductive system that is male, you can't get rid of that. And it's like, you're literally just moving the goalpost. And then these are the same people who are like, oh, I'm actually not transphobic, I'm just saying how it is, and you calling me transphobic actually makes me hate you more, and I don't want to listen to you because you're hateful towards me. I just don't respect you as a human being, and you're trying to convert me to your side, and I don't appreciate that. And I was like, you're transphobic. Like, if you're saying transphobic shit, at least back it up with the fact that you're transphobic. Like, I hate this backpedaling and like ignorance so much. I'm actually not transphobic because I'm not scared of trans people, because trans people aren't real. That's why it's such a waste of time to try to argue with these people. As someone who's like extremely neurodivergent and who grew up in an environment where I always had to explain myself and I always had to justify my behavior because like my parents didn't understand why I did certain things the way I did. So I always was like in this state where I constantly had to, you know, explain myself. And I always thought that like, maybe if I just found the right words, maybe then I will finally be able to get my point across. But it doesn't matter what you say to them. It doesn't matter how you say it. It doesn't matter how many facts you have to back it up. Like, they're just going to find a reason to dismiss it anyway and are just wasting your time. So it literally doesn't matter. They're going to dismiss it. Like, I had people dismiss studies because, oh, the experts are woke and it's a biased study because it's talking about gender studies. It's a biased study because the URL has gender in its name, because it came from Gender GP. I had people be like, oh, World Health Organization is actually woke. I had people not be happy with the dictionary I chose to like use for definitions. So I tried to find others, and then they were like, oh, why do you need so many sources for such a simple definition? Here's something from 1605. And then you're like, hey, you know, maybe we shouldn't hold on to old definitions because like definitions change, language evolves, that's just natural. You know, like, you don't have issues with the word heterosexual. It used to mean someone who is like extremely obsessed with someone of the opposite gender, and like that has been changed, like you're okay with that, and then it's like, oh, you know, but like, oh, some words are allowed to change. Why is gender not allowed to evolve, but other words are allowed to evolve? And they're like using like mental gymnastics to justify that behavior, and it's just so annoying to read that over and over again. And most of the times you don't even know if you're talking to a real person or just a bot, just a disinformation bot, just something to waste your time. So I tend to block like 90% of the comments I get. Every time I see something on YouTube, 90% of the time I'm going to like just hide that person and make them disappear from my page. And then people are like, oh, you know, because you're so unapproachable, like people are being turned away because like they just ask questions. Can't we ask questions anymore? You can ask questions, but if you're like phrasing them already in a way that show me that you've been indoctrinated by right-wing propaganda, and I give you the benefit of the doubt and I'm going to answer your question and you're going to hit me with like, yeah, but no, I'm not going to listen to you. You don't deserve to be heard out. Like, your opinion doesn't matter because it's factually incorrect. And I'm trying to explain to you why it's factually incorrect. And you're so arrogant and so ignorant that you literally refuse to hear me out because you don't want me to prove you're wrong. You can tell when someone asks questions with ill intent and they don't mean to actually have a conversation. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are like phrasing it also in a way to like fake sympathy and like compassion. Literally just to turn around and hit you with the most stereotypical right-wing trope, and then you are wrong for like blocking them. Sometimes people slide into my DMs and they're asking me how to like deal with like transphobes, and the only advice that I can give them is literally just like block and move on. Live your best life. Don't listen to these people. We know that we are valid, we know the education, like we know all the science and whatnot, and these people just refuse to like be educated. And there's nothing you can do to like fix that. And it's not on you to fix that. They're celebrating that they've been blocked and they think they've owned you and you're stuck in your echo chamber and you just refuse to hear them out. It's just bait. They're literally just looking for attention. Yeah, blocking these people just doesn't feel satisfying. It's the same with like hateful people like in games. Like reporting and muting and whatnot, it doesn't feel like satisfying at all. I would be willing to play devil's advocate on the under 18 transition restriction if and only if those people would be willing to be consistent and rush those 18 plus. They never are. They just move the goalposts after making it harder. Yeah, like you can't compromise on these things. You know how puberty blockers used to be a compromise? It's like, oh, we shouldn't put like 12-year-olds on like HRT. We need to like have them work out with experts if that is actually the right path for them. And now they're coming after puberty blockers. Not our job to educate them, especially when they just use it as an excuse. Oh yeah, I'm literally just a random person, a random trans person on the internet talking about her own experiences. It's coming for puberty blockers just when they are for trans people. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like you try to compromise with these people and then they show that's actually not about like children. It was never about children. It was literally just a foot in the door. If you find compromises with these people, they always want more. Like they still haven't given up on going after like gay marriage. Children and protecting women is always a good foot in the door. This is literally 1930s repeating itself again. And then you like explain these things. Oh, you know, like this happened in schmatzy Germany. And then these people are like, nope, actually, no, this is different. This time it's different.